So golf on the weekend, boys.
Yeah, I'm pretty
Yeah, how you
excited.
feeling, mate? All right.
I'm excited
FOMO,
to hit it into the scrub.
FOMO hard. Although I did tell Harry about the racing that you're missing, Joe, and he was a
Sorry,
little
one
bit.
sec.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, okay. Give us 1 minute.
Tapped out.
What you saying? F?
Tell Tara I started the pod.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. What did you say after that?
I said, I told Harry about the racing that you're missing, and he thought it was pretty cutthroat.
What racing?
The horses leaving
Fuck the
under
horses, bro.
leaving under high and dry for the fields of Glenmore.
Why would I want to fucking go with horse racing?
All right, let's start.
One
Lads,
second, Tara's just making an ice drink. It's a bit loud. 30 seconds. Can you hear it in the background?
no,
Oh, you can't hear it.
no.
That noise cancellation is good. Okay, then just
All
start.
right, let's go. Episode 71 of the Racing Line podcast, boys.
The
Another
podcast.
first week of racing. This week, Supercars, Generation 3, Streets of Newcastle. Oh, craziness all weekend. High adrenaline, low downforce. Where do we begin, boys? What an awesome weekend of racing.
I will say, I think it
Give me
was
just your initial reaction before we start getting in the specifics, Joe. Just give me your half a sentence reaction to the event.
I think we're onto a winner. That's what I'll say. I don't think it's the product is where it needs to be, where, ideally it's going to end up. But I think all things show that we're onto something pretty special.
Harry?
Yeah, I agree. I think it was a hard track to decipher the racing per se, but still awesome product. I loved it.
Yeah. I mean, new cars, they look fantastic. The tightness at the front of the field in qualifying was awesome. The track is not going to be the most, pass friendly track, even at the best of times. So that was kind of a little bit difficult for teams to navigate. But I have to concur with you, Joey. We look like we're on a winner. Everything points towards an awesome era of supercars coming up.
I think it can be understated how important the fact that they look fantastic is, because the way that they behave on the track, the way that they sit, the way that they look when they're racing, it all ticks the aesthetically pleasing box. I didn't watch even the cars that I didn't really particularly like on launch window. I thought looked a lot better in the flesh. And number one, the thing that's going to gravitate sort of bring the fans is if the spectacle looks cool. And, those low cars definitely tick that box of, all right, if anything, we're starting from a place that the cars look cool. There's something that when you're making highlight videos and advertisements for it, it's going to tick that first box, that very important box.
Man, the fact, we can probably get into this in a little bit more specifics later on, but I think just the optics of seeing cars sliding around, wanting to break into wheel spin, kind of power drifting out of the corners just because of the amount of torque that was being delivered to the rear axle. I mean, in a weird way, it's kind of like a gymkhana, like the kind of speeds that are going through the streets in. And you can physically see it. The cars look tougher to drive. They look like they're harder to handle and kind of wrestle around the track. And I think that's, from a fan's point of view, that's really cool to see. And I think, there was, they were talking to some of the drivers and they were saying, we got to the end of Gen 2 and these cars were perfect. These cars kind of, we'd evolved them to a point where they, for the most part, stuck. And a good car kind of was good all weekend and a bad car was bad all weekend. But that kind of was what gave the disparity in the past. Whereas now, even a good car over, a 30 lap stint deteriorates, just due to the tire wear, with the new formula.
I want to hear what Harry has to say because I haven't seen him send so many messages about a supercars weekend onto the chat. So I think
he's been a Chaz Mostert simp all weekend.
Well, I do like Chaz. I do like Walkinshaw. Even though they are Ford these days, they're still taking a bit of adjustment to, support a team that's a Ford team. But yeah, look, didn't have much going on this weekend, so I was able to watch both races in the full. I loved it. I thought the track was awesome, even though there wasn't a lot of passing, just the skill needed to get those things around
You're cracking up again, Harry. But I do have to concur with that.
Sliding all over the place. Yeah, I thought it.
He's taking a bad pinger.
Yeah, but Joe, I think we have to say, like, just building off on what Harry was saying before, it's kind of like, obviously it's not a Monaco-esque track. Like, it's got really no similarities to it, apart from the fact that it's a straight track and there's no real runoff areas at all.
I think it's this weekend highlighted how bad of a track it is.
I don't know. I wouldn't say it's a bad track because there's, quite a lot of skill involved. I think it probably needs,
another meter.
It needs another meter. I think also, like, there's not really many overtaking points. There's two big ones, and I think the turn 2 was fine. I think the hairpin, which is at the second last corner, I think that probably needs to be a little bit wider, because it just seemed, now that the cars are wider compared to the last time they raced there with the skinnier Gen 2 cars, because they're wider, it seemed like it was a little bit easier to defend going into those braking zones than it was in the past. But, with all of that being said, it was Monaco-esque in the sense that even though there wasn't a lot of overtaking, particularly in the second race, the intrigue wasn't actually based on the overtakes. It was based on, Cam Waters hitting the wall. It was based on the different strategies that were played out. It was based on the tyre differentials that we saw with Mostert, Van Gisbergen, what we saw with Waters too, before he kind of bent his steering arm. So, like Monaco, the intrigue for the race was actually built in a very different way.
Yeah, I think it definitely did become sort of a pit stop race as well, in terms of how slowly the new fuel system refuels the car, brings a lot more into play compared to last year. And also that whole, I think in the first race, you saw a lot of cars in their first tint burn their rubber very quickly, and then they were very hampered until they got those new set of tires on. And I think
I don't know how you boys thought about this as well, but like when I was watching the racing, I think there was also a number of times when drivers had a run on other cars and kind of pulled out a little bit in some scenarios. Now, I don't know if it was that because people know right now that, spare parts are hard to come by, whether there was like a directive, hey, it's the first round, let's just try to bring the car back because we don't have, all the pieces that we need to fix it, considering that it's a street circuit. It's also, I don't know if just because it's the first race and there was a bit of a feeling out period, it's early in the season, whether, drivers were kind of pulling their punches a little bit just because of the nature of, the spare part situation as it is right now. These cars are just, 2 or 3 weeks, if that, from being completed, just the actual race cars themselves.
I think that point in particular, it sort of bears testament to how good the builds were for these cars. That there was, I think, in the first race, only one car failed, like actual car component failure in Percat's car. But like realistically, the weekend went pretty swimmingly in terms of cars being able to finish the race. But also I think was important was when you look at the spread, I think especially in the top 10 shootout where you could see like which cars, like a very good variety of teams in that shootout. There was competitive Chevys and competitive Mustangs. Like and I understand the parity isn't exactly where it is. You're expecting it, not expecting, but it needs to be by the time we get to say halfway through the season. But I thought it wasn't far off. And then I know the argument will be made that there was a few times when the Chevys looked like the grid was a little bit lopsided for them. But at the same time, I want to have a few more race weekends of seeing the data, because
I think they got it pretty good by the end of the weekend. They got it.
I want to know if like a lot of it had to do with teams just not, like it was maybe happenstance that the teams, like the 4 teams, really shit the bed. Because
I think it's fair to say that the weird thing is Dick Johnson Racing were the team that actually kind of, they were the main developer of that car, and they seem to have the least understanding of the operating window based on the weekend, which was really interesting. And they both struggled, and they both
They had a
struggled.
horrible weekend.
Yeah. The
They didn't
interesting
have one.
thing,
They didn't have one top 10 finish or one top 10 shootout. What's it called? Entry.
The interesting-
It'd be
baffling.
interesting to know.
oh,
It'd
sorry,
be interesting to know when the last time that actually happened with DJR.
Would have been before the Penske buy-in, that's for sure.
I was kind of thinking, but before we go into these hypotheticals, I think it's probably good that we start with this. So anyone who didn't watch the race 1, SVG, Brock Feeney first and second, Cam Waters finished in third. It was a pretty dominant race by the Red Bull team. They were disqualified from the race for ice box or cool suit infringement based on where they put the cool suit and where they were tipping the ice into the essentially the container for the cool suit. That's still up for review. Race 2, a lot more competitive. Mostert qualified on the pole, which was really good. David Reynolds was on the pole. Mostert was in second. Third was
James
Golding. Fourth, Cam Waters. And then we had the Red Bulls behind there. A lot more intrigue in the race. It ended up being a race that Van Gisbergen won. Mostert came second, and third was David Reynolds. So if you want to go back and watch that, you can. But going back to the point we made about the parity, and kind of just to discuss it a little bit, something that I was looking at throughout the weekend wasn't so much the winners or the top drivers, because they're always going to be able to push the car above and beyond the call of duty with kind of the hardware that they have. But I think when you looked at some of the drivers that were in the midfield and traditionally quite close to each other, I think that's where you saw the discrepancies between the Camaro and the Ford a little bit. So, for example, your Winterbottoms, your Pies, they obviously had 888 cars, so there was probably some level of information that might have been given to them as well. But Erebus as well, those mid teams seem to perform better than the Ford drivers in the mid teams as well. If that makes sense, your Thomas Randalls, James Courtney had a pretty good race in race 1, but he was still mired behind, 4 to 6 Camaro. So when I look at that,
when you think about it, a lot of the drivers who were, so you look at like Slade in the Premier racing car, you would last year in the Blanchard car, he was sort of in the same, he was always in good positions as well. So I think it is easy to say that the mid-pack Chevys looked like they were in a better position than the mid-pack Fords. But I think in the second race, you definitely saw a lot less of that, which makes me inclined to think that it could have just been happenstance that the Ford teams could have had bad, setups or burnt their tires quicker, because that definitely seemed like something that paid a lot of dividends in that first race. And then the fact that you have Chaz and Davey Reynolds on the podium in the second race, and if Cam hadn't had his brush against the wall, probably 3 Mustangs straight behind Van Gisbergen from 3 different teams, lends me to believe that there could be a parity thing, but also we have to take into consideration that 888 just also deals at such a very high level. And if this category is, burning up tires even more, the king of saving his tires, unfortunately, is Shane Van Gisbergen. So I think before we start, really harping on this parity thing, which isn't perfect, we sort of at least give it a little bit more time before, rash decisions are made.
I think that's super fair. And I think I'd be a little bit disconcerted if they made any parity decisions, before, I don't know, round 4 or something like that, just so they get a few different tracks.
What's up, H?
Environments.
I had a question regarding Tickford and Walkinshaw for you both. I just wanted to get your opinion. Percat was well off Chaz's pace this weekend.
Yeah.
I don't think he finished anywhere near the top 10 in both races.
On Saturday, he was pretty good.
was pretty quick on Saturday. He had a bad qualifying, but they had a car component malfunction early in the
Yeah.
race.
But then we
Second
also
race, he was
had
nowhere.
James Courtney was in the top 10 shootout for race 2. But other than Waters and Courtney, the other 2 Tickford drivers didn't do much. Now, we said last year that Percat had a season where he had to pick his game up. If he continues along this trajectory, can you see them making a change earlier?
I don't think they'll get rid of him before the season starts. And I think it's a bit too early to make judgments like that. Having said that, I think if, say, he ends the season how it started, he will definitely be gone.
Yeah.
Because that was a massive gap.
Tickford, I think there's less to be concerned about because Thomas Ferrender was a rookie last year. He's probably got another year before he hits his peak anyway. Tickford give a lot to people that haven't proved a whole lot, and they give them time to
look at Golding.
Waters is the prime example. Did nothing for 2 years, and then kind of.
But Golding's not a rookie. Golding's had what? This would be his fourth
year. This is his fourth year in Supercars,
yeah.
so he's kind of earned his stripes. And then obviously, what's his name was his first race, Declan Fraser. So I didn't really expect a whole lot from him at all. But I think Percat, he just can't seem to qualify because when he's got practice. Not practice. There's no pressure in practice, but he's always put in the car somewhere, and he has got some ability to drive through the field. We've seen that last year as well. But the problem is he mires himself down the field, and then it's just like you saw, like a lot of the tracks that Supercars race on, and because the racing is so close, if you're that far back, I mean, you can make 6-7 positions in a race normally if you're really good. But if you're starting from 14th, 15th, as often as he is, well then 16th even, well then getting into the top 10 is kind of the ceiling when you consider by the time he gets into that top 10, the front 6, they're well gone because they've just had a little bit more clear air. So he needs to pick up his qualifying game because realistically, before his move to Tickford, before his move to Walkinshaw, he was the hot commodity, and he's not doing a whole lot since.
Does that just say how good Chaz and Cam and all them are, or do you think he has the potential to be close?
Yeah, I think I would love to see, not that it would ever happen, I would love to see them two in a Triple Eight for a season against SVG, the 3 of them, just to kind of get, a fair barometer of where they're at. We spoke about it last year. We spoke about how Triple Eight has the consistency that the other 2 teams just can't match them with. And they get everything right. Tickford and Walkinshaw got the qualifying right. They had a blistering qualifying pace. Those 2 guys will pull, 12 tenths out of a lap. They're that quick. But when you've got a 95 lap race, they don't have the setup that Triple Eight have, which is just the way it is. What about a few stories from the race? I think we have to start with Premier Racing. I mean, Saturday was looking fantastic. They had a few welcome to Supercars moments and a few rookie mistakes that derailed them in the pits on Saturdays, and it kind of didn't really reflect the potential that the team had. But Sunday, 2 cars in the top 10, James Golding finishing 4th. I mean, that's an awesome effort from a team that he's only been around for literally a year.
I've 2 things I want to see going through the year. First and foremost, I think great start to the season for them. They announced the double Newlon car sponsorships, which I thought was awesome. Come to the race, get 2 cars in the top 10 shootout, have a race where both cars finish in the top 10, leave you some decent points. You can't really ask more than that. My only caveat is we definitely saw that the Triple Eight built cars this weekend were awesome. So if that is a sort of a fact that lies in where the other teams, as they build up to the the competitiveness against Triple Eight, will those other 2 teams sort of lose competitiveness because the oversaturation of the top end with actually more competitive cars on the other teams. I think that's the only question like left with them. Having said that, at the time where the car is dominant, capitalize on those points, like we always say. When the sun's out, make hay.
The thing that is interesting for me is you've got them that have been there for a year. They're in the same situation as teams like MSR, Team 18. They're all customer teams from AAA, and they've had a weekend to remember that's probably better than any weekend those other two teams have had, and they've been around for a lot longer. So at a very base level, the fact that they're a new team, they've got engineers in the team that have never run supercars. It's probably good that this is the year, like it's a new year, new car for everyone. But I'm super.
They've also invested quite heavily in that team, though. Like that team isn't made up of scrubs. You look at the driver lineup. Slady is a old workhorse. He's going to be super consistent. Golding has never had a season when you thought he was trash. He's definitely had moments that show how good he can be. They're bringing in a lot of experienced talent on the technical side out of Triple Eight last year. And then you look at sort of Pete Shibris himself. He runs a very successful company. He seems like a very matter-of-fact person, and he runs his own drag team as well. I don't believe
a successful drag team, like everything he's done.
That's exactly what I just said. I literally just said that. So like, the team is built on the right pillars, for success. So I'm not surprised about that part of it at all, to be honest.
What about Team 18? Team 18 had 2 top 10s on the Saturday, and then again on the Sunday, if there was an issue to befall that team, what would the issue be? Power steering. And again, Mark Winterbottom had power steering failure. What is going on with Team 18 and their power steering? This has been 3 years now of power steering issues.
I don't understand. Like it's become more than a joke. It's ridiculous. I don't think I've known another car in that time that's had maybe 1 or 2 maybe 2 power steering issues other than them.
You got to turn some lights on, Joe.
I don't know. Just the lights didn't change. It just went really dark, like out of focus.
There you go.
Yeah, absolutely
Caucasian
bizarre.
again.
Huh?
You look Caucasian again.
I know. I was going to say something. I thought, it's probably not the political climate to say it.
What were some other talking points that you guys took from this weekend?
Race 1, the Red Bull incident.
Yeah. Interesting. They made a big deal about it, but I kind of think that it was pretty cut and dry. And even when you were listening to, Dado had a bit of a spiel about it on the telecast on the Sunday. When you can tell someone's saying something, but they're not fully convinced about what they're saying, you can tell they're saying it because they've got kind of a vested interest in it. It's kind of what it seemed like when he was, I think he realized that he screwed up. I think he realized he made a mistake and that it was on him.
Well, the thing is, they're saying that they asked Supercars if they were able to do it before they did it, and they got clearance to do it.
They asked Roland Dane if it was okay. He said it was an interesting system and it would work, but they didn't confirm it in an email like they would normally do. And the reason why they didn't do that was because they kind of just assumed that with the kind of feedback that, not Roland Dane, sorry, Adrian Burgess gave to them, that was enough when it wasn't formalized. And the reality was that it wasn't. And they didn't dot the I's and cross the T's before the season started, and they got pinged for it. I think the fact that every other team on the grid kind of
didn't do it would
would say that there's a consistency thing there. So
Well, the proof is out there that it gave them a performance advantage because they got a 1-2. So, I mean, due to that fact, I think you have to pull them back.
that's sarcasm. I can hear the
it gave him 30. It gave Van Gisbergen 13 seconds on his teammate, and then his teammate another 6 seconds on Cam Waters. So if that wasn't a performance advantage, I don't know what is. I think what was probably a bigger talking point was the hullabaloo about Shane Van Gisbergen's conduct in the press conference after the race. To be honest, I don't know if you guys looked into it, but there's a few very stinging words from Mark Scaife and then his ex-teammate Garth Gander about sort of the professionalism you need to carry, and if you're the face and the ambassador for the sport, you have to, and it's in your contract to participate in these press conferences, sort of not act like a whinger and just answer the questions regardless of how robbed you feel about your disqualification in race 1. I thought they were I thought they were strong words.
I tend to agree with Scaife and Tander on this one, to be honest with you. I mean, we hear in sport all the time that the reason why, or every sport has a vested interest in getting people talking, has a vested interest in particularly in sports where the key drivers wear helmets. Any opportunity they have to present some information, to talk to the public, to kind of put a face to themselves, it needs to be taken. For the reigning champion, or the winner of a race to kind of go in and and I guess you can say that things were against him all weekend, but if a question's being asked about a speculative move, and we'll get into the move maybe a little bit later on, if a question's being asked about a speculative move to win a race that is somewhat controversial in its very nature, then, don't be so proud and just think that because I don't know if it's because he's the champion or because he's the best, he feels like he doesn't have to kind of justify himself. But I think it's a warranted question, because there would be half the fans of the sport would have felt that move at the very least was speculative, and probably 3/4, because once you start winning, people don't like you as much. That's just kind of how it is in the spirit of competition. So if that's the case, at the very least, justify yourself, kind of say he broke a little bit earlier than I expected, kind of say you had a run on it, say something, just, it doesn't have to be smug and abrasive and just kind of sours the whole weekend, particularly when you have someone like Mostert, I think, who could have really said a little bit more than he did. And he was kind of very diplomatic about how he felt about the whole incident. So if you've got the person who was wronged kind of saving face, well, then at the very least, the person who kind of, did the doing doesn't really have a leg to stand on.
I love that Mostert tried to give it back to him too, on the next corner.
Yeah, I do too. I'm happy to see them giving it back, but at the same time, I kind of, I objectively, that move should have been redressed, I think. And I think obviously they didn't go and appeal it, but I feel like if they did appeal that move, there would have been grounds for it. We saw at the start of the race.
I don't think there was grounds for that.
Well, Will Brown pushed Cameron Hill off the racing line from the rear, made the pass because of it. It wasn't as dramatic as that move, but he made the pass because of bumping someone offline, and he got a 5-second penalty. And I think that if they would have pursued it, there would have been a very similar grounds for that. Now, you can say that the 888 Van Gisbergen, because he had the pace, kind of warranted that position, but you got to make the move, and you got to make the move stick. And he wasn't 3/4 up the side of the car. It wasn't like he nudged him and it was even close to being fair. He could even defend it. He nudged him, and as soon as he was offline, that move was done. So I really, I don't know. I don't think it was a clean move.
It was a little bit cheeky.
I don't think it was a bad move, but I think at the very least it's redressed. At the very most, it's a 5-second penalty for the sake of consistency. So what, the next time we have a race and someone's behind, we just see another, bump and run, and that's kind of the precedent you want to set from the second race of the year? I don't think so.
Well, the other thing is, I think the precedent has been set for Shane, that he can sort of do those kind of moves, like we saw it happen at Tasmania last year, where he sort of was doing a very similar sort of cheeky move coming down into the kink. I think it's down to the other drivers racing against him to sort of give him back as well as he gives. Whether they can get close enough to do it consistently.
It's easier said than done when they're realistically in inferior cars.
Yeah.
So the bullet they have is their defense, because they qualify really well and they're super consistent. And then they've got to kind of keep him behind. And that's fair and that's fine. But if that's the case, then if he's going to make the move and he's got a faster car, you can make it clean. That was disappointing, I thought. It was a good race. I think Chaz took it really well. Listen, we all knew that give it another couple of laps, he probably would have made the move anyway. But considering the situation and it being time certain, he doesn't make the move there. He can get, 3/4 of the lap around. Who knows? Maybe he gets a good run. He can defend, find more lap. And then, Bob's your uncle. You've got to win. So I don't think it was as cut as dry. I don't think it's as cut and dry as, Rubbings Racing in that regard, because he hit him from behind. There was literally no run up the side at all.
I think you made a fair point. I don't know if I would go as drastically as that, but I definitely agree with Chaz that it was a very cheeky move.
If they had have given him a 5-second penalty, would you have been surprised at all?
No, I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have been surprised if he was even asked to redress.
Let's take it a step further, Harry. If they had have given him a 5-second penalty, would you have kind of felt, oh, that's harsh?
No, not at all.
You're such a Mostert simp. I love it.
Well, no,
because I was in the same camp. I kind of felt like he did a really good job that race, Mostert. I think he did a really good job keeping up. And, I don't know.
I think even if it was Cam or whoever, I would have thought the same thing, because he's essentially moved them out of the way. And the car, he had that much more pace that he could have got that move done later on.
It's not even that he moved him out of the way and they were on the same tyre life, because that would have been, they would have still had the same traction coming off the corner. He had significantly better tyres. He moved him off the line. He moved him out of the way, and then just the wealth of traction that he had.
It's also the fact that you when you sort of when you bump someone in the braking zone itself, when you're bumping, when you're accelerating or when you're going at full speed, that's one thing, because you're not sort of hurting each other's actual pace. But when you're doing a bump in the braking zone, which totally alters the other car's braking momentum, angle and everything like that, I think that is where, why you see a lot of cars either redress or just wait behind for the other car to settle. I think it's all swings and roundabouts. I think he'll come back to bite him in the ass.
Well, any other talking points from this race, boys? I can't wait to get out to Melbourne for the Grand Prix. I was telling Harry today, I feel like I'm more excited now to go and watch the sprint races for the supercars on EM for the F1.
It is epic around Albert Park, hearing those things go around. I will say.
I feel like also that Albert Park is such they've made it so much faster, particularly in that back section. But with these cars having so little downforce, it's not going to be an easy race for them. They're going to go from really high speeds to these really big braking zones. They're going to have, no real downforce during those fast flowing sections. It's going to be gnarly. I really can't wait to see it. It should be a spectacle. But yeah.
Like I said to start off the pod, I think all this weekend did for me was it it more than piqued my interest. It got me genuinely excited for this new Gen 3 car. I think you saw you saw a lot of foundations that can be built onto something very strong. I saw a poll today which was quite interesting, but also I think very telling. It said, "Do you think?" It gave you three options. Do you think Gen 3 was a success week one? One was yes, no, or too early to tell, and it was like 49% too early to tell, which I thought was probably about right. But I do think that looking at what it is unbiasedly, there's more than enough magic there that with a few shakeups and just, getting the balance in properly, I think this can be something special.
I say this. Supercars last year was not a broken machine. It was super exciting. We loved it. And I wouldn't think it's too much of a stretch to say that already this spectacle looks better than what we had last year, objectively. Just
when you have a Mustang, it looks like a real Mustang. I mean,
yeah, but even
just,
I think there was a lot more diversity on the grid. I mean, just how close the qualifying was. You could have had you had Tickfords at the front of the grid, you had Tickfords at the back, you had Walkinshaws at the front, you had a Walkinshaw at the back, you had BJRs at the back. When do you see that? You had what's his name?
Peter Premier Racing at the front.
Newline, like there was just, Blanchard had a good qualifying, qualifying. I mean, Erebus looked amazing on the Saturday. On the Sunday, they kind of were a little bit out of the window, and they struggled all weekend. So I think the championship this year becomes a lot more about kind of like we always say, minimizing the trots. And I think we're going to see a lot more, particularly this year, because every track's a new track with a new car. We're going to see, people hopefully, shaking up the grid. With all of that being said, Formula One next week, Saudi Arabia. I'm going to not be negative, but we have to wait and see what the race brings. Yeah, I think we just got to wait and see what the race brings, guys. But next weekend we'll be coming.
Fernando for the win.
Fernando, yeah, mate. I hope so. I need to get my my prediction right. But next Monday we'll come to you with a bit of a review from Saudi.
In the meantime, who are you putting your money on for the first golf tournament between me and Harry? I mean,
I think
Harry probably has a good big game, but does he talk up as big a game as I do?
I think the fact that you've never wielded a golf club in anger before would kind of
not even in anger.
I wouldn't even give you a punter's chance. Let's be honest. The fact that you've brought it up
punter's chance.
The fact that you've brought it up on, on the airwaves kind of shows your ignorance. But I do wish you the best.
I was just being
Joe. I know. I do hope
I was just being funny, you jackass.
I do hope you go out there and love it. The fact that you're enjoying it so much is
without
giving
playing
me FOMO. Actually, it's genuinely giving me FOMO. But yeah, I hope you love it, mate, because it might be more exciting than Saudi Arabia.
Oh, come on, mate. Don't be like that.
I think we'll leave it there, boys. We'll come back to you guys next week with a review of race 2 of the 2023 Formula One World Championship. As always, thank you so much for listening. Please continue to share, like, react positively on all of our socials. I think that's enough. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great night.